What we're all chasing is freedom. As an entrepreneur, maybe it's financial freedom, time freedom, but if we're carrying these burdens, then that freedom never really shows up. Welcome to the David Laut Show for faith-focused entrepreneurs who are successful but want to create eternal value too. Let's get into it. Christians always think about stewardship in the financial context. And God has made us complete people. We're vessels, right? That he is living his life through. Romans 2:20, I believe. We have been crucified with Christ and we no longer live, but Christ lives in us. A simple way to think about that from my perspective is time, talent, and treasure. A lot of people have talked about that before, but what our capabilities are that God gave us, the time that we have as a resource, probably the most valuable resource, and our money, all those things are stewardship. And so I think it's important for Jesus followers, frankly, to be evaluating, how am I using my time? How am I using my talent? How am I using my treasure? And am I using them in a way that's coordinated? Oh, I'll give my money here, or I'll give my time over here, or, hey, I'm good at this, maybe and I don't think that that's how God is calling us to live. I think he's calling us to bring all of the spheres that we are in outside of ourselves, and then all of our talents that he's given us, time and treasure. And we're supposed to be starting to intertwine and blend those all the time. It's not like Sunday, Monday, or this activity or that thing.
Talk to me about the time piece, if we break it down just one by one.
Mm-hmm.
For me, time is the hardest, or it's the one that I've struggled with the most. And I think the reason being is I grew up, before I was a Christian, kind of adhering to this like grind culture where you need to put in the work in order to be successful. And then once you reach a certain level of financial wealth or whatever it is, then you can spend your time how you want. So I feel like there might be this struggle of God is the owner of, my life and my time, but I also have this feeling of like, I almost want control over my time. So how do you go about dealing with that, or have you faced something like that in your life?
I think that anytime we feel like we want control, we think that we're going to lose liberty by giving it to God's direction. Right? I think that an easy way to think about your time and how to allocate it is first by going to the end and working your way back and saying, what is successful use of my time look like? What are the things that God calls me to spend my time on? To what extent? What are my priorities? Obviously, I think a lot of people would agree on him first, family second, work third. Okay, well, inherently that's it's talked about, probably agreed upon narrative from a worldly perspective, but in terms of how people are spending their time, probably upside down, right? Work, family, God. And I think that what I had the opportunity to do, I had a lady that was doing some consulting with me, and she had me account for every hour of my week, including sleeping. And that was an effort to be efficient. But what I did with that is I said, okay, look, how can I represent my life from a time standpoint where I actually am maybe not giving equal time to those three items, but starting to move more towards, am I going to spend a third of my time with God? I guess I could, but am I giving real time, like measurable time there on a daily basis? And then am I balancing work and family, which are both the ministries God has called me to do? And so I think if you're measuring success in that way, but you're not living that way, then you have a time problem. And let's say you're putting a lot of time into work. If you're building a company or you have a lot of responsibilities there, I understand that. But what happens is that trade-off is a faith decision, because if you know that God's calling you to one standard of, hey, I need to be spending time with him, family, and my work, and my family is more important than my work, and that's what I'm doing it for. But then you find that you're spending too much time working. The reason that you're not capping your work is because you feel like if you don't, or if you do cap it, then somehow you're going to fall behind. Somehow you're not going to achieve, something's going to fall through the cracks. And so I think that that's like that barrier, potentially that allows people to kind of step out in faith and let God, fill in those gaps.
From an entrepreneurial perspective, when it comes to time, a lot of people think like you have to be putting in X amount of hours, whatever it is, 70 hours a week, to be successful.
Yeah.
To achieve, maybe even the dreams and goals that people feel like God has called them to.
Right.
How do you navigate that balance, especially being not just a husband, but a father of 7 kids and navigating the X's and O's when it comes to that?
Yeah. I think there is a piece of it that is just foundational, which is when you're young, you kind of do have to build a foundation of work. Hopefully some of that gets to be done before you have the responsibilities of a wife and children, maybe not. Also, just like mechanically, if you're starting something, you're the only one doing all the work. So you got to do a lot of it, right? And I can use that as an excuse. I certainly use that on my wife a lot, especially when I went into business for myself of, hey, we have to sacrifice now for what we want later. And that's a life principle. You do what you don't want to do today to get what you want tomorrow. That's exercise. I mean, that's everything that's worth doing. But that so easily that mentality can be abused beyond maybe where God wants it. Because if you are assuming that if it's to be, it's up to me, then inherently you got to work harder. And there's a lot of talk about working smarter. I think a lot smarter way to go about it, at least in hindsight, is, well, actually, if it's to be, it's up to God. The idea that we are in control of the outcomes is a false narrative. What we are in control of is our activity, and we are supposed to work heartily at it as unto the Lord. Well, what is the Lord requiring of us? Well, I think that's actually mentioned in the Bible. What does God require of us? Trust in the one he sent. Of course, working hard, working unto the Lord, yes. But you got to say, hey, back to that stewardship conversation. I am stewarding God's time and talent and treasure. What is he asking me to put into this? And if I'm putting more into it or I'm taking it back onto my shoulders, not only is that disobedient, but it also is going to really stress you out. Right?
That is stressful. Yeah. Okay. Talk to me about talent. Talent is a word that makes me think of maybe skills that I've been blessed with or things that I've come to know and learn over the years that I can utilize to help other people in God's kingdom or give glory back to him. Do you have a different perspective of talent? Like how do you view talent within this structure of Christ-like living, especially maybe from that entrepreneurial mindset?
I think that there's probably more to it. You were an exceptional athlete. You played college baseball, right? I didn't play college anything. I was always good, but I was never great. And that was probably a combination of effort and, inherent ability. But I think that talent is a combination of inherent qualities God gives you that, by the way, I think in my view, are kind of there from birth. If you have children, you can see what they're predisposed to. When you become a Christian, God then is able to take and leverage those God-given abilities and use it for his kingdom. You can use those abilities for yourself, for your flesh, or when you can become a believer, if you surrender yourself to the Lord, you can use them for his kingdom. So that's one set.
I want to cut in on that.
Yeah.
How do we know the difference between, okay, I'm doing this for God or I'm doing it for myself? Or is there an overlap there that like it's bound to happen, right? So for example, Lauren and I work in social media and oftentimes, there's opportunities that come along and we have to pause and think to ourselves, like, is this honoring God? Sometimes it's very clear that it is or it isn't, and we can make a decision based on that. But sometimes there's a gray area and it's hard to really navigate where our heart is in it.
We're ambassadors for Christ. So, an ambassador represents another kingdom, right? Or another king in our case. And am I representing that king well? I think that when we walk with the Lord and we live the way that he has designed and we use all the things that he's given us in obedience to him, there's gravity. There's going to be success associated with that. People are going to want to hire you. People are going to want to promote you. People are going to want to work with you. Is there collateral blessing out of that? Yeah. So there's the guilt side of looking at that. Well, we did this brand deal with XYZ company that made us money. How does that glorify God? Well, one way it could is that you're gaining influence that you can use to represent his kingdom. Maybe a silly way of thinking about it, but if Jesus is inside of you, everywhere you go and anything you're doing, you're bringing him along with you. If somebody's paying you to stand on a stage, well, now we're broadcasting him to whatever that stage is in front of, So I don't worry so much about that. God sees the heart. Right? God knows our intentions. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him and he'll direct your paths. As long as we're acknowledging him in those decisions, I don't think we need to worry about that too much, as long as, there's not a check in our spirit. And at the end of the day, the devil is going to be accusing you. Oh, well, you're just doing that for yourself. Oh, you're just doing that for this or that. And, God knows, God gave us, he put us in these positions. If we truly believe, so the other side of talent is the set of experiences that we have that gives us unique abilities or insights or perspectives. So there's that natural God-given, and then there's this set of experiences that we have. Well, God's orchestrating both of those. I think that what you're talking about falls into that latter, that set of experiences.
When you think of the talent that you've gained over the years, right? Because we're growing people, we're continuously becoming, right? How do you trust God with that growth personally?
I think that it can go two ways. When you're good at something, there's going to inherently be people telling you how great you are. And as you get better, it's easy for that to go to your head, right? And for you to be like, well, I guess I'm the man. I am good at this. Everybody's telling me I'm good at this. Look, I'm having financial outcomes that say that I'm good at this. I'm outperforming other people. The problem with that is that now, as the ability or that talent is more owned by you, the further you get, the further you own the outcome, basically. Also, as you take more of that credit, now it becomes more your job to follow through or to live up to whatever your ability is. And so,
which is stressful,
which is crazy stressful, right? And Jesus says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Okay, well, how's that? We can recognize that we might be getting more skillful at something, or, we have a talent, maybe it's better or on a relative basis to somebody else, more proficient. But I think that what I'm learning through tough circumstances and through failing, taking it on myself, or even feeling like, hey, God told me to do this, I'm going to go do it. And without actually walking with him in it, where we need to be is knowing that whatever he's given us is only there as long as he wants it to be. And that's at a minimum. Even more than that, the only way that talent is going to accomplish anything of eternal value is he's going to be in it, and we're surrendering. We're just being a vessel when the ability is being owned by us. So this is it. When the ability is being owned by us, and maybe this is not just our ability, but anything, when we are owning anything in our lives, the eternal value of that has got to not be that significant. Inherently, it's going to be of earthly value. And anything that we own, if we can transition to stewarding, then all of a sudden now we're opening up the door for it to have eternal value.
Talk to me about resentment. This is one where, whether it's relational resentment, financial, maybe it's trusting in God and he didn't deliver the way that maybe you thought he would. I know for me, I've had times where I've been resentful of, maybe a time where I was taken in a different direction than I thought I was going to be. And I had to really wind myself back from that and say, no, look at all the good that's come from it. And so what do you do if you face resentment or if you feel those resentful thoughts coming on?
Bro, this is a deep well that you're uncovering. And I think that resentment is birthed out of unforgiveness. Right. Ooh, there's a lot of stories here. This may be its own show. I would say, if you fast forward to the end of this conversation, the great news is that God in my life has used unforgiveness and resentment, once I've been able to overcome it, to point out my own flaws in my life and allowed me to make a major shift. It's just the classic, like, me pointing a finger at somebody else and three pointing back at me. He's used like some major instances for me to literally change the trajectory of my entire life. So where do we even start with that? I think that resentment and unforgiveness is something that can weigh, it can literally like just tear your soul. You're just degrading day by day, carrying these burdens. And so one thing I've learned about unforgiveness, even if you feel like you're not at fault, is you have to go and address it. And I'll tell you a story. I've got a number of stories like this, but unfortunately, fortunately for you. So there's the guy. So before I came here, I had a job and I took over a role for another guy. And he had been in it for a while and had a lot of success in it. And so when I came into this new position, I was kind of coming in under his shadow, and this is my perception. And, I was kind of made to feel, hey, just so you know, like you're just drafting behind what I've already done for you. So anyways, long story short, I felt disrespected. Now, as a young man, and probably even today, I get disrespected easily because I think I have got a lot of pride, but I don't think, no. And so I didn't have a whole lot of nice things to say about that person for a period of probably 5 years, I would say. Well, I'm at a conference in San Francisco and I see this guy in the room, and just the end of this is like, we're good now. But I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And then I immediately start feeling God saying, like, you need to talk to him. And this is probably 500 people in this room. And I am just stewing, right? He's on the opposite side of the room, what feels like a mile away. And we're in the presentation. All right, God, if I run into him, I'll talk to him. If you make it happen. So I kid you not, presentation ended. I'm at a round table. I turn around to get up and he's literally, hey, David, there's no way. Did he teleport here? I don't even know how he got across the room that fast. So anyways, I had to tell this guy that, and I hadn't spoken to him in like 5 years either. Hey, I've been talking a lot of trash about you. I'm sorry. I won't do that anymore. And, here's kind of why I felt that way, but that was my bad and I won't do that anymore. And I apologize. And he was, what are you talking about? But he forgave me. And, which praise God for that. And that lifted a lot of a weight for me. So there's been other times in my life where I've had similar things and I just carry these resentments out of feeling wronged and unforgiveness, of course. And, since that, I've found out that the Bible says, and you can go look it up, but it's pretty specific. If you don't forgive others, then God won't forgive you. So, I'll let the theologians kind of hash that one out. But all I know is it's something that the devil can use to just kind of destroy you inside. And what we're all chasing is freedom. As an entrepreneur, maybe it's financial freedom, time freedom, but if we're carrying these burdens, then that freedom never really kind of shows up. And so I think that that's kind of what we're trying to do in this podcast is, what is the pathway to real freedom in your life? And it's not just money, and it's not just time, and it's not just internal peace, right? It's this whole combination of things.
Right. Well, and we have to understand like the definition of freedom, because if we have a bad definition of freedom, then the pathway we build isn't taking us to the true freedom that we actually desire. Yeah. We end up on this path, you look back 10, 20 years from now and think, wow, I just went the wrong way for 2 decades. Yeah. So I think it's really important to understand what that freedom is, why it's important.
So what do you think freedom is? Because I've got an idea.
I mean, at its simplest form, I think freedom is understanding God's love for you through Jesus and what he did on the cross. And with that, living out, loving him and loving others to the best of our ability. I always think if I can love Jesus and love the people that he's entrusted me with in my life, and like that's all I accomplish in this world, then I've lived a freeing, God-honoring life.
So I'm going to challenge you. So when I was in sales training in my previous world, they would say, there's a difference. You can either talk features or you can talk benefits. Features are just aspects about what you're selling, bells and whistles. Benefits is how it solves something for you. So you just described to me some features, I think, of freedom. What are the benefits of freedom?
So maybe the fruits of what comes from that.
What's in it for you?
Well, when I think back to before I had a relationship with Jesus, my life was very directionless. I struggled with understanding the purpose of life and why am I here? So I think one of those benefits would be understanding like what my purpose is. I'm here to love and have a loving relationship with God. And I get to have that. And like, especially living in the United States, there's freedom of religion. I can pray, I can talk to people, I can go to church, I can worship whenever I want, right? I have that freedom to be able to do that. And so it's a really powerful thing for me, coming from that background of not having the relationship with God beforehand and being really directionless. So that's the first thing I think.
So that's a weird thing to say, right? Because you're telling me that freedom is having direction, where before you had no direction, you could do whatever you want, but you didn't feel like you had freedom.
I think of it like, as a parent, right? If your kids are out playing in the street, you as a parent are constantly watching them, making sure there's no cars coming. Like you're very stressed out and watching them and making sure, okay, are they okay? Well, if you set up parameters for them, safety parameters, where okay, they can go out there and they're going to be fine running around. I can let them be. Now, if I'm putting myself in that kid's shoes, which one feels more free? when my parent is constantly, looking down at me and making sure that I'm not in trouble, or I'm in this zone where I have the world at my fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a rough transition.
There's a study that was done about that. You may be referencing it, but there was a study that was done that looked at kids playing on a playground without a fence around it. And what happened was they tended to stay, even when they had like open field and stuff around them, they tended to stay closer to the playground. But then they did a separate study where there was a boundary line, like a fence, and kids actually felt safer to go and explore everywhere. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting thing. Yeah, for me, freedom is, the benefit is peace with God and men, and peace with myself. So I've got peace in this level of relationship. I've got peace at this level, and I've got peace inside. I think that is what freedom is. It's not, and yeah, do I go through seasons of like having turmoil internally, or, here or even here? Of course. But what God is offering is the hope and the opportunity for freedom on all these different levels,
I'm reminded of when I was a young Christian, I had this feeling that I needed to earn God's love. And when that flip switched and I realized, well, one, I'm not supposed to be trying to earn God's love. He gives it freely.
Right.
But two, I couldn't earn it even if I tried.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's just impossible. Yeah. So there's a freedom in knowing that he paid the price for me to be able to have that relationship with him, to live in that freely in relationship with other people. That is a very freeing thing.
Yeah.
Talk to me about treasure. This is the one that people struggle with the most, I think.
Before we go there, let's go back to, because this is a podcast or geared to people who are Christians trying to live in that entrepreneurial space, or in that business marketplace space. I think that where freedom can hang us up, and I experience this a lot, is kind of all the things we're talking about, but you mentioned resentment, is when we feel like we're in conflict with somebody else within our sphere. So like we're trying to get a business deal done. We're trying to deal with an employee. We're trying to deal with some level of an issue. My predisposition is to solve the problem myself. I've had issues with, neighbors. I've had issues with employees. I've had issues with other business people, other businesses. I'm going to solve this. What isn't freedom is feeling that way. And what is freedom is saying, and by the way, lots of resentment, pride, unforgiveness, all in that. So it's kind of interesting how when we take it over, that's kind of the net result, stress. And then otherwise, if we trust in God to solve the problem, hey, God, and that's like the owner. I'm the owner of my time in these situations, so I got to solve it, versus, hey, God, you got a problem because something's going on with my life. I'm stewarding it. This person is causing me, or this issue is causing me a problem. I need you to solve it. That is freedom. And candidly, where's room for unforgiveness and resentment when it's not even your issue? That issue is with God, not with you. I just want to kind of tie that back together, because even right now, I'm going through we'll call it a negotiation, or we're trying to buy a house. And so things keep coming up, and I'm always just defaulting to, I got to negotiate this better, or I got to, and then and of course, how do I feel? Horrible. Am I sleeping? No. I'm waking up at 4:00 in the morning. I'm kind of hanging on to all this. So what is the purpose of this house? This house is intended to hold me, my wife, my kids, who are by the way, also God's kids, because he doesn't have grandchildren. Like all these people that God loves, this thing is supposed to solve a problem for. And yet I'm the one who's taking control. All right, I can just give that back to God. He can solve that problem, So anyways, I think that that's just a good example of, practically speaking, how do we get freedom? Having the faith that I don't need to solve this myself. If I wait, if I'm patient, God can solve it for me. Maybe not the way I want, but in a way that's in my best interest,
So really it's about ownership, right? Who's the owner? Is it you?
Yeah.
Is it God?
Who owns this outcome?
I struggled with that early on, especially in my personal finances, because I felt like, I live in this world where the general person doesn't have a good grasp on, how to be successful with personal finance. And so for me, it was something I almost prided myself on, of making sure I'm doing things what I feel is correct and handling it the right way. And I got to a point where I was so stressed out over up 1% one day, down 3% the next day. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to sit back and look and be like, why do I feel this way?
Mm.
And it's because I felt like I'm the owner of all this. Like, this is
Yeah.
mine.
You got to do it.
I got to do it. And if I lose it, then, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world for me. And it's such a selfish way to live. But apart from that, also was just, painful to live that way and stressful. And
horrible.
Yeah, every day. And so I had to.
It's a prison, not freedom.
Exactly. And so now I look at it and I think, okay, God, like, this is your money. We want to use it to honor you and whatever that looks like. And so it's not as stressful. There's that freeing sense.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
So speaking of money,
yeah,
let's talk treasure. When I think of treasure, the first thing that comes to mind is, pirates and like a bunch of gold and like a crown. But when most people hear the word treasure, they probably think of money, their personal, whether it's income, net worth, whatever it is, assets. So tell me about treasure in this dichotomy. What do you feel is important for us to know about how we steward our treasure well?
When we were talking about this conversation of time and talent and having faith in God, there's this concept that I feel like God has been showing me, which is so talking about tithing is a very controversial subject. And I feel like most of the discussion around it is like, do we have to? There's entire Instagram pages devoted to debunking that we need to do this and that everybody who is asking people to tithe are evil and using it for self-indulgence.
Which is understandable.
At the end of the day, all stereotypes come from something, right? From some, repeated pattern. So I get that. So I think the beginning is all of God's instructions are not intended to give us rules. We are made in God's image. Very clearly from Genesis, we're told that. And so when God gives us instructions on how to live, he's trying to show us the pathway to us being happiest, flourishing. And so even the 10 Commandments are a great example of that. Like, they seem like a set of rules, but when God says do not murder, he's not like saying, well, I've got to restrain you, you're not allowed to do that. I'm not a murderer. God am not a murderer. So don't murder people, because that's not going to go well for you. The first commandment is have no other gods before me. Well, this may not have been true in different degrees, depending on what treasure may have been, in Old Testament times or like ancient times. Maybe it was livestock, maybe it was land, maybe it was, resources, and now it's money. But what God instructs us in that tithing conversation is to make him God first, because money is the access point to all of the things that provide us sustenance: water, shelter, food, etc. Right? And so inherently, by giving God our resource first, we are putting him in a position of God and not money. Because if we don't, then we're still holding on to money as our means to sustenance. And God says, well, I'm the bread of life. I am living water. I am your rock, your strong tower. So it's like all of those foundational things that like Maslow would say is necessary to a basic level of human existence. God says he is that. And so when we transfer money to him first fruits, which was all the way back to Cain and Abel in Genesis, I believe that God is trying to do us a favor by showing us how to have faith in him. Because in my own life, when I started tithing, which was about 10 years ago, I didn't really understand what it looked like to have faith in God in a practical way. Like, I believed in Jesus, that he raised from the dead, and that was my access point to eternal life. But it was all a future thing. And so I think what's interesting about tithing is it brings faith into a real current life application. And God's not doing that to us to take our money, because, oh, by the way, it's all his money if we go back to the time, talent, and treasure thing. But he's saying, here is a practical step for you to take to trust me. And when I show you that I am trustworthy, that might give you a reason to trust me with your talent, to trust me with your time, to trust me with your family, with your work, with every other aspect of your life. And so I think that is kind of the purpose of the treasure discipline, the tithing discipline. God's doing it for us. And we talked about this the other day. Back to the 10 Commandments, he's asking us to give because he's a giver, right? Like, he gave us while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He gave us everything. And so we are just imitating him in doing that. And anytime we imitate God or his character, we are living our best lives. Are we able to do that all the time? No. Are either Garrett or David able to do that in and of themselves? No. But is Christ in us able to achieve that? Yes. And when we do, then we're kind of like being transported back into the garden where God is providing things for us, where we were originally intended to rely on him and just kind of manage everything. And we got to have a relationship with him, and he was walking with Adam and Eve in the garden, and there was not separation. And so to me, I think that that's the thing about tithing that is so missed, is that God is giving us an opportunity to have a practical entry point to faith and relationship with him so that we can get back to the Garden of Eden, which is a life completely reliant upon him.
That makes me think of, like one layer deeper almost of Imago Dei, and like that we are made in the image of God. Well, if God is a giver from the beginning, right? He created all of this. He gave us his son to die on a cross for us. If he's the ultimate giver and he created us, it would make sense that we have this, there's something inside of us that needs to give in order to be living like a God honoring, but also like a healthy life. It's a healthy thing to be a giver, to live with open hands. I think, the most stressful times for me are again, back to when I'm trying to hold on to stuff. We're not made to be people who just consume, keep. We're supposed to be givers. I think that's very healthy.
So I think there would be a lot of people that would agree that both marriage and having kids are a great way to become a better version of yourself. Why? Because you become less selfish and you have to give more of yourself. Well, tithing is the same thing. All of the things that make us a better version of ourselves, the way that God designed us, are a factor of us having to give some element of ourselves to someone else.
Tie the idea of tithing beyond just finances to the entrepreneur, the leader, maybe somebody who's in charge of an organization or people. How do we bring tithing into that perspective of a leadership position?
I didn't start here, but where I'm at now is I am putting towards kingdom causes at a minimum, whatever pre-tax earnings I have. That's the best way the simplest way for me to say, hey, what is first fruits to the Lord? And I feel God's challenged me to go above and beyond that lately. And so I've had the opportunity to do that in a couple ways, but beyond that, we are supposed to be taking that position of leadership to also be taking care of the people that God's given to us from a financial standpoint. So I felt like it's my job to pay my people as much as I can afford to. And if I can afford to do that in a way that's above market to some degree, then I should be doing that. Because at a human level, I'm demanding a lot of those people, right? I'm wanting a certain level of commitment. So I need to show them that same level of commitment. The other thing from a financial kind of thought process perspective is a 401k plan. A lot of employee benefit plans start with this inherent owner benefit, like a 401k plan as an example. A lot of people set those up in their business to have the majority or how they're structured be designed to benefit the owner, not necessarily the employees. And that was true for me. So the practical example is when I first started our 401k plan at Carrick's, there weren't that many employees and I was by far the highest earner. And so it allowed me, even though I had a 401k plus a profit sharing plan, and it allowed me to put in a lot of money every year. The numbers have changed over time, but like $60,000, $65,000, $70,000 a year. And then I, on a relative basis, was giving the employees a little bit. So on an after-tax basis, this was a great thing for me. Yeah, it cost me a little bit to administer it, open it, and pay the employees, but I was getting the majority of the benefit. Since then, that is no longer true, right? And so we continue to do it, and our employees have this tremendous retirement benefit that we're both aligned on because they have to be here for a certain amount of time to get all of it. But it is a decision that was made where I said I could go to match and just be like, all right, well, they have to contribute to get all of it. I could have like reworked that for myself. But instead I let that go because I'm trying to make an investment and use what God's given me to make sure that I'm blessing them. The other thing that I try to do too is always continue to look for opportunities to build skills into people so that I can justify paying them more. How can I train this person or give this person opportunity to develop new skills so that their market value is going up? And if somebody's market value is going up, it's our responsibility. Much is given, much was required. And when we have people's livelihoods in our control, God's asking a lot of us. And people know if you're invested in them. It's not just a financial thing. It's also a discipleship thing, which is more important than the financial piece of it. But just since we're talking about the finances, if you want to have influence with people, like they have to know that you're for them.
They're entrusting a lot of their time, right, to
100%.
who they work for, because you're spending, on average 40 hours a week working for somebody.
Yeah.
You do have this innate desire to like actually enjoy what you're doing and the people you do it with.
100%.
And so I appreciate that perspective. And I think from an entrepreneurial mindset, leaders would want to find ways to incorporate those ideas like into their, the people they lead. Time, talent, treasure, under this bridge of stewardship and tithing, and how does it all make sense to you, to the entrepreneur, to the leader, to the go-getter?
The simple side of my brain says, okay, the spheres that I live in are, I've got time, talent, and treasure, and that represents kind of who I am. And then the world around me is my work, my family, and my community. So that could be the church, that could be the kingdom of God. And I feel like a lot of people, compartmentalize time, talent, and treasure just on their own. They don't view those as one thing. And I think that a lot of people who may still be on the journey towards having overlap between God's kingdom, their family, and their work, because the God thing is a Sunday thing and my family is a 5 to 9 and 5 to 9. Yeah. Basically outside of work hours. Right. So Sundays is God's, outside of work hours is family, and inside of work hours is work, right?
Boom, boom, boom.
Boom, boom, boom. And so, those should be connected. God's intent is that they kind of converge into one thing. I'm living and working in God's kingdom for my family, for the kingdom, and for my ministry or my work that God's called me to do all the time, right? And I'm using my time, my talent, and my treasure collectively in all of those spheres, so that like my whole self, time, talent, and treasure, and my whole sphere, work, family, and the God's kingdom are all tied together. I think that's the opportunity. What I think people can do is just really evaluate back to starting with yourself, time, talent, treasure. Okay, if I inventory that and I really look at how am I living my life? How am I spending my time or my talent or my treasure? Where is that happening? And how do I think about these different spheres that I'm living in? And what are the barriers that need to be taken down for those things to come together? I think inherently the largest barrier is going to come back to a money barrier, probably. Which is kind of back to that gift that God gives us to try to reflect his character through tithing. Because the difference between somebody going all in for their business, for the kingdom, and not, is being concerned that they're going to lose business or it's not going to be marketable or whatever. And that's just my feeling. That at least was true for me, I could say. And so I think that goes back to that treasure thing. But if we can start to learn to trust God and he can show that he's trustworthy, he says it, but if we can believe it and have him show us in real time, not only does that mean walking with God and God's presence and influence on our lives is a real current, not future, but current thing. But then we can start to like translate that to other spheres of our life. And I think that is kind of the thing that breaks the wall down. Because between work and family, that wall is, hey, well, I got to make sure that I'm getting this done at work so I can support my family. I got to work extra or whatever. And then work and church, well, if I talk too much about like my faith or church or whatever, then I'm going to like lose a financial thing. I just feel like those are all tied to the same root faith step. To me, that's where we're going back to liberty and freedom. I think that that's what we're all chasing. I think that we're all chasing this opportunity to be one person all the time, not have to be a chameleon. I'm this way around this set of people, and I'm this way in this environment, I'm this way around my family. We're all yearning to figure out who has God made me to be, which is, by the way, where I feel most comfortable and where I'm having the most fun and where my talent is being used. And I want to be able to live that way all the time. To me, that's the goal. And that's where freedom's found.
Yeah. Being my true identity, my true self that God made me to be at work, at church, with my family, with my friends, whatever I'm doing, I am wholly, WHOLLY, wholly me.
Yeah. If we could put Garrett Case back in the Garden of Eden, before the fall, whatever that is, how can we translate that to May of 2026 in the United States of America? Yeah. I mean, that to me, that's what we're chasing. And I think it's possible.
That's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more about your faith and your finances connected, check us out at carixhq.com or Look in the show notes and you can sign up for our monthly newsletter where we talk about the markets, stewardship, and all things finance.